So CES was last week, and I was not there. But we did see some really awesome tech, and today we're going to be talking about my favorite products and announcements from companies like Asus and Samsung, and even some honorable mentions like Even Realities with their new smart glasses. I'm sure many of you remember the iconic Boston Dynamics video of the big dog robot from the early 2010s. While this did give us a glimpse of what the movies had been showing for years, it was clear we had a long way to go before we were going to get actual robots integrated into society. Well, I think it's safe to say that CES this year had the most insane lineup of robots, and I think the thing that's key here is that all of them were really smooth, moving in a really human-like manner, which we haven't seen from a bunch of companies at the same time. We've seen it from one or two that really stood out in the past, but there were several robots that all looked to be functioning at a very, very high capacity. To me, this feels like just the start. It feels like we're in a position similar to when we first got small form factor laptops, not the big clunky machines that everybody was used to seeing. While I don't think I need to say robotics is going to be a pretty pivotal change in society in the years to come, I think it's pretty safe to say that we are on the cusp of really getting some crazy advancements, and I'm really intrigued to see where this goes. Regardless, let's actually talk about some of the consumer tech that I think is really cool. What I absolutely love seeing from companies is pushing the envelope when it comes to what we consider typical hardware design. And we've seen that the last few years, specifically with monitors. And this year we got some very cool updates. The first is the Asus ZenBook Duo, which is a design that we have seen in the past few years. However, this feels like the first time it's really polished. It has a dual vertical mount display that allows you to use it in both dual screen mode and also just a single screen mode. Pretty standard specs with various Intel processors for you to choose from, 32 gigs of RAM, an M.2 SSD for very quick storage, and an Intel NPU for all of that Copilot usage you'll be doing. Anyways, what I really thought was cool with this was the estimated 18 hours of video playback. But that's not the best part. That's in dual screen mode. That is not that far off from a MacBook Pro. And of course, if you take it to single screen mode, it's even better. I think this is just a perfect example how you can have some really cool tech in very cool form factors without sacrificing looks or other areas of your computer where you used to have to sacrifice certain parts, whether it be you needed to have a higher battery wattage, etc. We'll see what this battery ends up looking like when the laptops actually are released, but I think this is a great indicator for where our products will be going when it comes to multi-monitor laptops. The next two are technically concept laptops, and they are also going for the increased screen real estate idea, but in a different way. They're both made by Lenovo, and the first is the Lenovo ThinkPad Rollable XD, and the other is the Legion Pro Rollable. They're going about it in two different ways and different than the Asus that we just talked about. The Lenovo ThinkPad is going for a look that we have seen in the past, and I think it's even been seen on Jimmy Kimmel, where the screen actually extends as you press a button vertically instead of horizontally. Now, this is a form factor we have seen, but the new thing is the screen wrapping around the front of the laptop. And I know we've seen this on a few different Android folding phones the last few years, but on a laptop, I just love the idea that we're really pushing that envelope of what we expect from a monitor on a laptop. In contrast, the Lenovo Legion Pro Rollable is essentially a similar concept that we've seen in the past where the screens extend horizontally, but instead of the typical folding approach that we've seen, it also is extending like the rollable in size. While I can imagine that these products are concepts for a multitude of reasons, the big ones I think are the failure points that could be occurring with this new technology that needs to be refined a little bit, And also, I think a big one is the price that this would come in at to make this profitable for said company. I don't really know what this will look like in the future, but I'm super happy that we have companies pushing the envelope, challenging other companies like Asus in this department, and hopefully can drive that price down. As the Asus ZenBook we just talked about is going to be coming in at almost $2,000, if not more. But next, I want to talk about some more increased screen real estate devices like the Samsung Z Trifold. While I'll never be able to walk away completely from the iPhone ecosystem, I'm a huge fan of these new Android folding phones. I think they create an opportunity and challenge the market in some other areas. Like, these folding phones are getting large enough to be almost tablet sized. But of course, with that comes some challenges. And I think the main issues that we see right now is the challenge of the tech not being as caught up with the idea. Manufacturers have to make these individual screens very thin so that when you fold it, it still feels like a normal phone, not too heavy. And the other issue is the points of failures. With the hinges, we have issues with reliability and being able to break said hinge, as well as things like dust, sand, various foreign objects, essentially being able to get into that hinge and thus requiring repairs. The Z Trifold has 2 hinges, which is awesome. It creates a massive 10-inch display when it's completely open. However, that is 1 additional hinge and 1 additional point of failure. Regardless, I think this is super, super cool. I can't wait to see how these continue to expand to make them even more reliable, but also much more affordable. What we need more of is competition in this space. Samsung and Google are the really only 2 main competitors when it comes to folding phones. However, Motorola just announced their new Razr Fold, which I'm hoping breaks up that dynamic a little bit and increases the probability of somebody choosing another folding device. The idea here is that they could come in at a slightly cheaper price and hopefully drive some consumers to Motorola, forcing Google and Samsung to decrease their prices. Because most folding phones right now are coming in around $2,000. That's the same price as the Asus ZenBook we talked about at the beginning. Anyways, that'll be coming in summer/fall, probably around the September time when Apple and the rest of the major companies releases their products. Now it's time for my absolute favorite announcements and products from CES, the first being the Lego Smart System. While I know I'm an adult, but I absolutely love Lego, and I'm really intrigued to see what these smart bricks end up being able to do. The smart brick is one of the items in the ecosystem, but I feel like it was highlighted the most. It's a 2x4 brick with various lights, speakers, and sensors. Based on the presentation, when you interact with Lego sets containing these bricks, you might see some lights or sounds based on sensors picking up the interaction between said bricks. What I'm really hoping here is that instead of just reactivity, they start introducing new bricks that can produce actions based on the sensor readings. Like, how cool would it be if, as you were a kid, when you were playing with your Legos, when you had 2 ships that were, flying around, and for a brief second their sensors interacted with each other, those lasers that you typically see, that you would have to press the little laser, looking item to shoot out of the Star Wars ship, what if that happened automatically? And I know that's getting a little robot-like, so maybe I'm a little off base, but I think innovations like this is just the platform to introducing really cool tech. And Lego, with the whole idea of you're building what you want, I'm really hoping they seize the opportunity to make some crazy innovations. Lastly, I want to talk about the new Even Realities G2 smart glasses. These are essentially heads-up displays within the glasses. They're a little different than the typical augmented reality glasses that we see from companies like Meta. Because it's just a heads-up display instead of augmented reality, the tech that's needed isn't as large. So as you can see, these look like normal glasses. So when I saw these, I was instantly hooked. I'm really not a huge fan of the big bulky augmented reality glasses. I feel like it's not really fitting that lifestyle approach that we'd want from wearable technology. The glasses provide some great features by default, like teleprompting, an AI chatbot, some checklists, and even a general widget display for your quick access items. These technically have been available for purchase for a little bit, so this was not necessarily announced at CES. However, it did win a couple of awards. I'm sure some of you have even seen these elsewhere, as YouTube is how I found these. And what I don't see a lot of people talking about is the potential for developers to create their own apps or widgets within the glasses. That's awesome. Like, for somebody like myself, as soon as I saw that, I was like, how do I sign up? So I did a little research, and I actually applied to be one of the developers to get early access and work with the devs from Even Realities just a few hours a week, but to work on my own, widgets and even some mini projects. If I do get accepted, I will 100% be documenting that journey here, so more to come on that. I think it's safe to say CES this year was a huge hit if you ignore all of the AI stuff that was being shoved down everyone's throat. And I didn't get too much into that today because I have feelings that many of you probably have about all of that AI content. But I think it's really awesome the direction that we're heading in, and the devices and tech that we did see give us hope and yearning for what's to come. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next week.